Are you rich? It's something we often all ask ourselves, but how much money do you need to be in the top 20, 10, 5%, or even 1% of New Zealanders? I called up Stats New Zealand to ask. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, I'm Ed, an economist and property investor, and one of the questions I often get asked when I'm talking on TV, radio, or writing for the Herald is how much money do you need to be rich? Now, the average Kiwi is worth $400,000, so 50% of Kiwi households have more than this, and half of us have less than that amount of money. But when I called up Stats NZ to find out how much money Kiwis actually have, honestly, I almost fell off my chair. I couldn't believe it. Because even if you are worth $1 million, which is a lot of money, that $1 million doesn't even get you into the top 20% richest people in New Zealand. In fact, 24% of households are worth $1 million or more. That's almost 1 in 4. Now, let's put that in perspective. I'm assuming that maybe you're not a millionaire just yet, and I say yet because if you're watching this channel, you probably aspire to be a millionaire if you're not one already. But if you are not there just yet, then when you're walking around the street, 1 in 3 people you walk past are from a millionaire household. So New Zealand is way richer than I thought. And when we say millionaire, that's our net worth. So everything you own, like your house, your KiwiSaver savings, any shares, minus your debts like your mortgage. And by a household, we mean everyone who lives in the home. So it could be mum, dad, and a couple of kids. Now, to get into the top 20%, you need $1,150,000. So how could you get there? Well, let's say we've got a couple, we'll call them Jess and Ollie. Now, if they bought the average house in Auckland in 2010, it might have cost them $450,000. Zoom forward to today, and the median house value in Auckland hovers around that $1,050,000 mark. Now, if Jess and Ollie just bought a house and stayed in the market for the long term, they would have made around $600,000. That is over half the money they'd need to be in the top 20% of New Zealanders. But when they bought that house, they would have also had a deposit, right? Now let's call that 80 grand. So that's another 7% of their way to being in the top 20%. Plus they would have paid off some of the mortgage over the last 14 years, call it 200 if they're paying it down quickly. That's another 17% of the money they would need to be in the top 20%. Add in a couple of KiwiSavers. If both Jess and Ollie are working, they might have 75 grand each. Maybe they've got some other savings, a couple of cars and some furniture, because yes, furniture counts too in this calculation. And bam, they are millionaires. They're in the top 20% of Kiwis. So yes, buying your own home, paying down the mortgage, holding it over the long term while it goes up in value, that can be enough to put you in the top 20% of Kiwis. But to get into the top 10%, you do need to do something more. And if you like learning about money and property in this really number-focused way, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to grow the channel to 20,000 subscribers. To get into the top 10%, your household needs to be worth just over $2 million. That would actually put you in the top 1% of households worldwide, but since New Zealand is a rich country, being a multi-millionaire actually only puts you in the top 10%. A shocking 186,000 households in New Zealand are multi-millionaires. And I had to call up Stats NZ to double check those numbers when I first got them because I couldn't believe it. Now, us Kiwis, we often feel that we're poorer than the Australians, the Americans, and the British, but 1 in 10 Kiwi households are multi-millionaires. To put that in perspective, if we held a conference for multi-millionaires only, over 500,000 people would show up because everyone in the household is invited, mum, dad, and the kids. And that is more than the number of people who live in Wellington City, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt, Porirua City, and Kapiti Coast, plus an extra 30 to 50,000 more people. It is outrageous. Now, it is important to mention that these numbers were taken in 2021 when property prices were a bit higher than they are today. But even if these numbers are a high watermark and are a little bit inflated, you've got to admit there is a lot more wealth in New Zealand than at least I thought. And these numbers made me excited because it shows that building a decent amount of wealth is possible in our country. If you own your own home with a small mortgage and bought a couple of rental properties over the years, you could be in the multi-million-dollar club too. And if you are looking to invest in property, make sure you check out our website, opuspartners.co.nz, because we help regular Kiwis grow their wealth through new build investment properties. To get into the top 5%, you basically need another $1 million. So $3,150,000, that will get you in the top 5%. And that means that 1 in 20 people in New Zealand are worth $3 million plus. Think of it this way. If you go to a movie and you sit in the cinema, there might be 177 seats. Well, if that's your local cinema, at least 8 of those people might be worth $3 million plus. To get into this tier, you probably need to be doing something more than just buying your own home. To get rich, you need assets. So many Kiwis invest in property, or maybe you've started your own business. Either way, just having a high-paid job and saving a truck ton, that probably won't cut it. Ignore inflation for a second, which would make this even harder. But to save $3.15 million, you would need to be putting away $2,883 a week consistently for 20 years. And no one's doing that, at least nobody that I know. So you need to focus on assets like property, businesses, and shares rather than just relying on a high income and saving a lot. But to get into the top 1%, you need $7.59 million, and that is a lot of money. But remember, there are 5.3 million people currently living in New Zealand, and that means there is roughly 53,000 people who are worth $7.6 billion, call it, or more. And I was recently talking about this on my show, the Property Academy podcast. That is basically the population of Nelson. So if all the top 1% decided to move to their own city, it would pretty much be the population of Nelson. There is money in New Zealand. We are a rich country. And you can look at this data 2 ways. You could either say, well, I don't have $7.6 billion, or whatever tier on this list speaks to you, and you could feel bad about it. Or you could say, well, this shows me that creating a comfortable amount of wealth is possible, whether you want to be in the top 20%, 10%, 5%, or even top 1%. If other people can do it, you can do it too.